So these videos are going to be documenting the City Council's theft of my funds, breach of contract, assault caused by City Council member, contradicting statements that the City Council has actually given to local councillors or MSPs and MPs about the actual situation. The City Council's stating the policy essentially overrides actual law, whereas I've had written documentation ensuring that I'm allowed to, let's say, cancel my standing order so I can actually get my money back that I was overpaying for 2 years. There was also email documentation sent to me saying I had no monies due. Aberdeen City Council also removing funds from Scott & Co that they also took from that money that I was paying for over 2 years. And then the account balance essentially went down to, I think it was like £10 after all the times that they gave Scott & Co money and then essentially refunded the money back to themselves. Assault was caused by the City Council worker when he came into my house, also breached Article 8 of the Human Rights Act. On one statement, they say that the letter was on my cabinet. On another statement, which was much earlier on, stated that the letter was on the floor, and I think they said that I handed the letter to them or I read it out. Whereas, of course, on the other statement, they say that, that the letter was on the cabinet and, they briefly read it. But even that admission is still a breach of Article 8 of the Human Rights Act because I have the right to the privacy of my own home with my letters and so on and so forth, and they have no right to read that document, full stop. Local councillors, MSPs and MPs as well were sent the same information as well from me and with the responses that the City Council gave myself. Whereas the City Council refused that they offered any such refund or ability for me to essentially cancel my standing order. And then, the local councillors, the MPs and the MSPs also received the email that I got from the City Council stating I am allowed to cancel my standing order to ensure that I get my money back. There is also statements on those letters, or emails should I say, as saying they will check if I have an outstanding balance of so on and so forth. And it is their policy to check. But there was no statement on there or also when I made the agreement to pay the debt in the first place. Whereas if I make an overpayment of any such money on any other contract as such, that I am obliged to pay something else. For example, it's like if you go to a store and you purchase, let's say, a book, and then they charge you, or if you, let's say the book is £10 and you give them £15, they do not have the right, even if it is policy, to basically charge you for another book for the rest of the balance of that money that you give them. You have an agreement. One person has an offer, one person has, acceptance of such offer, and essentially, let's say everybody benefits from, that contract as such, and then that is it. And granted, the amount of money that I was overpaid them is relatively small in the grand scheme of things, but it is not the goddamn point. On some of the other videos, we'll also discuss about, I had 2 police members enter my house without any warrant, without any means by common law to enter my premises, and they sat there and argued with me for about half an hour, and I found out a couple of days later that the reason why they were in my area was because someone was in severe danger. Now, if they indicated this to me in the first place rather than being egotistical as such and trying to enter my premises with an actual warrant, I would have let him into my premises because the reason why they were in the area was very, very important. I made a small informal complaint about this, and then I had a couple of other things happen. So then I put an official complaint about several other things with the police as such, and the police complaints department. I got told I'm going to have to wait about 9 months to a year before they even pick it up or whatever. I get sent an email on one of them, and I completely missed it for about a week or so, and they essentially said, oh well, you never responded, so we're going to cancel this and you're no longer going to be able to put in your complaint about the same issue ever again. So what, I've got to wait 9 months potentially before I get a reply on something, and then I've just got to give up because I missed it by a week or so? It's the same with the part with the one of the complaints about the police is the fact that they've miscalculated the assault caused by the council worker as a civil matter rather than a criminal matter. Quite simply is because They believe it to be because it's a civil employee of a civil institution as such. It is therefore a civil matter, and you can't actually charge him. Now, if the city council member essentially followed all the, let's say, rules and laws or whatever pertaining to his job and position and the reasoning, let's say if, for example, they can do technically forced entries as such. Now, if you had every reason to do so without breaking the law himself, then it would be a civil matter. But because he broke a law beforehand and then I refused entry, that does not constitute as a civil matter at that point, because he's not within his remit of the law. Therefore, it should be a criminal matter rather than a civil matter, because he has caused assault after he's breached Article 8 of the Human Rights Act. Therefore, I have the right to refuse entry at that point. Therefore, he is not following the letter of the law and, let's say, government policy or whatever when enforcing their policy restrictions or authority to enter any premises. It's also the way the council worker talked to me, and his general attitude when he actually came to the door is also a breach of the tenancy agreement as well, which is another reason why I was able to essentially allow myself to refuse entry as well. And yet, I still haven't had a response from the police complaints department about this. No one's actually phoned. I had a response back from one of the complaints I put in, which was basically about when I called the police about one of the issues. And I was talking about the council worker as such, and I was like, it's the same for the police. They can't enter your house and put their foot in the door without a warrant or without a means or by common law to essentially enter your house without particular reason as such. Say, for example, if they were chasing someone inside the building and it looks like they entered, let's say, my premises, for example, then they would be, common law would allow them to enter the premises. But because they had none of that, they essentially were not allowed to do that, because they're not allowed in the premises, because they're not allowed in by common law restrictions. They're not allowed in by the, without the use of the warrant at that point. So they have no right to stick their foot in the door. And the complaint I put in was because the officer at the time sat there and laughed at me and says, "No, you don't know the law." And I was like, "I'm sorry, but I'm literally looking at the law right now on the government website, which essentially stipulates this." So after he laughed about that, I got a little bit pissed, so I reported that as well. Every response I got back in the investigation was only 2 of the phone calls I made, because 2 of them was with a 101 number, and one of them was with the actual police officer, which was the one that was laughing. And mysteriously, that conversation was missing from the investigation. So the actual part I was complaining about is completely missing from the investigation. The part where he gave me false information on common law and the rights of the police officers to enter your premises is missing from that investigation. So that is generally what we're going to be talking about in the next current videos. Basically, we'll have emails or letters that's basically been photocopied or scanned as such and redacted certain amount of information. It's like, technically they are public officials, but I'm not really wanting any form of harassment or any backlash from them saying, "Oh, but you put this public," and it's like, well, I never put your name, so I'm trying severely hard to take this to court as well. When I talked to SPSO, they said they essentially couldn't get involved because Aberdeen City Council never took my complaint to stage 2. But for about 2 or 3 months, I was asking them to put my complaint to from stage 1 to stage 2, and they essentially just refused, stating that I needed to give them more information, which was really confusing, because the information they were requesting I give them was the information that they were given to the local councillors, to the MSPs and to the MPs. So they were requesting information they already had, and they were hoping that I didn't have it. So at first I refused because I already gave them that information in a previous email, and I just stated to them that, you can just check previous emails. For the stage 2 request as such, I don't even have to give them that information. The only requirement on my end is to have a stage 1 complaint. If they give me a response, if I'm not happy, I request to go to stage 2. That's it. That's your only requirement. Except that SPSO, Scottish Advice Helpline or whatever, and a bunch of other resources for, let's say, support groups or whatever, when I did discuss any form of it, when, they did essentially try and help in any form, says, oh, no, you have to give them this information. And I'm sitting here kind of going, well, that's contradictory to the actual statement of the policy and so on and so forth. And this does seem to be a common factor, is that, they'll state policy this, but policy that. And it was kind of very similar to when I used to work at, I think it was like a McDonald's or a Burger King or something like that years ago. And we ended up working, I think it was like 6 or 8 hours extra after a shift, because there was like an area manager coming in the next day. And they were like, okay, so we'll see you in a couple hours, when your shift starts. And I was like, that's not going to happen. And they were like, oh, but your, policy this. And I was like, I'm sorry, but I can't remember the exact word of it now because it was several years ago, where it's like you're only allowed to work a certain amount of hours, and you have to go home, and you're not allowed to go back into your work shift essentially until you have a certain amount of hours away from that work shift. So thankfully at that time I did remember the law on that part, because I've been screwed with that several times, and I stated that particular law, and I gave him kind of like a paragraph review basically of what it essentially says and what it means. And then after that they just try to get me fired. And it's a simple case of the city council, the police as well, stating policy this, policy that, policy this. Yeah, to me, every time I try and deal with them, I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't give a damn about your policy. Tell me the law that either allows you to do this or restricts my ability to do something. Give me the law. I don't care about your policy. Give me the law. And not once have they been able to do it, essentially. I think the only time they were able to do any form of that was within the last communication they gave me, when they finally put a stage 2 complaint through, and it stipulated a certain thing. And I can't remember exactly what it is just now, but we'll get into it in one of the other videos when we cover that particular documentation. I am goddamn tired with this, and unfortunately I've been told several times as well, either by the police, for one example, that I couldn't take my complaint to a lawyer or anything like that until I go through the complaints department. Then I was told by another officer that it doesn't matter, you can take it to a lawyer if you want, regardless of going through the complaints department, either case. So then there's contradictory information on that. And then of course with the SPSO, they're basically saying the same with the Scottish Helpline, is that, I have to talk to the city council, I have to go through stage 2, and then I have to go through SPSO before I can even take the civil court. And I'm sitting there kind of going, well, I can't get SPSO's involvement until the city council accepts my stage 2 request, which they were not for over 2 months. Therefore, they're in breach of their own policy, and then SPSO should have been able to take over at that point, because they're in breach of their complaints procedure policy. But, SPSO was like, no, you have to go through the stage 2. So, as far as I can tell, legally, SPSO are essentially saying they will not get involved if the city council never takes it to stage 2, which basically means if the city council decided to never take anyone's complaints to stage 2, SPSO would never be able to get involved. And if it is a requirement to take it to the court, that I have to go through stage 2, then I have to go through the SPSO, and then I can take a civil claim to the court. That would never happen. It wouldn't happen, because physically you would not be able to go to court at that point, because SPSO wouldn't be able to get involved until the city council would take it to stage 2. But if the city council refused outrightly to take it to stage 2, full stop, for the entirety of time, you're screwed. You wouldn't be able to take it to court. And each time I've talked to any of these people, either the city council or the SPSO or the Scottish Helpline, is they say I have to do all of these steps before I can take it to even civil court. And I'm sitting there kind of going, how the hell is that possible if they refuse essentially by taking inaction to be able to take it to court. Now, there's a perfect quote from a show I still technically watch. I absolutely love it. But in this, he says, "It is an age-old cry of the oppressor that enforces policy while at the same time disregarding equality and human rights of its citizens." Anyway, thank you very much. This is basically the intro video of pretty much explaining exactly what we're going to be talking about, like I said earlier. And I want to get into each part very specifically, and with a couple of emails, whatever, a couple of documentation, and kind of gradually put stuff out, and also like proofread it as well to make sure certain information is redacted,